As you can clearly observe from exhibit, Dr. Zix gestured with 3 of his upper appendages, while his lower ones scrambled frantically through his HFY files. These beings possess absolutely no natural armor, no scales, no exoskeleton, not even a decent layer of protective material. Just this laughably thin membrane they call skin, which tears if you so much as glance at it wrong. The Galactic Science Council members shifted uneasily in their gravity-adapted seats. Supreme Counselor Niai's crystalline form shimmered anxiously as she leaned forward. But how do they survive? That's what I've been trying to explain. Dr. Zix's voice rose several octaves, prompting the telepathic species in attendance to flinch. By every metric we understand, they should have gone extinct millennia ago. He pulled up another hologram, this one displaying alarming human injury statistics. Wait, is that from my medical records? A new voice interrupted. The unexpected comment startled the council, several members emitting their species' version of a yelp. Dr. Mei Jiang, the human test subject meant to observe quietly from the chamber's rear, had somehow appeared beside Dr. Zix's presentation platform. Dr. Jiang Zix's scales flushed a mortified purple. You were told to. Yeah, observe quietly. I know. Dr. Jiang waved dismissively, squinting at the hologram. But that's definitely my skateboarding accident from when I was 12. See that fracture pattern? Classic. Tried jumping off the garage roof with a homemade parachute. The council chamber erupted into horrified murmurs. You deliberately jumped from a height. Supreme Counselor Niai's crystalline hue paled. Well, deliberate is a stretch. Jiang shrugged. It was just a bed sheet, so really it was more like controlled falling with style. Only broke 3 bones. Mom was more upset about the sheet. It was from the good set. Dr. Zix frantically pulled up another set of statistics. Do you see what I'm dealing with? Humans survive injuries that would instantly kill any rational species. Oh, cool. Are those general Earth stats? Jiang leaned in eagerly. You should see the numbers from just Florida. We had a guy in my hometown who... Perhaps we could save the anecdotes for testing. Zix interrupted desperately. Your loss. Jiang shrugged. It involved an alligator, a lawn chair, and a 6-pack of something definitely not meant for consumption. Classic Tuesday. The council's chief medical officer, a being of neural tissue encased in a protective field, pulsed rapidly. I've reviewed these injury survival statistics multiple times. They cannot be accurate. Humans survive penetration of their protective cavities by foreign objects. You mean getting stabbed? Jiang asked. Yeah, happens all the time. My cousin got impaled by a fence post at his wedding. Finished the ceremony anyway, didn't want to waste the venue deposit. Could have been the open bar talking though. But how do you function without proper armor? A younger council member burst out. Easy. Jiang's grin turned mischievous. We just walk it off. The council fell silent. Dr. Zix muttered weakly, this might be a good time to discuss the testing protocols. Though he glanced nervously at Jiang, we may need to revise our safety measures. Come on, Doc, Jiang teased. Where's your sense of scientific adventure? I left it behind when you mentioned the shopping cart incident. Zix muttered, his scales a distinct trauma green. The Supreme Counselor raised all 4 appendages for attention. I believe we've seen enough to approve immediate testing. Though perhaps we should notify the medical team to prepare for contingencies. Good call. Jiang nodded. Might want to stock up on coffee too. I get cranky when injured without caffeine. There was this one time in grad school. Moving on. Zix barked, switching holograms so forcefully he nearly broke the projector. Let us begin with impact resistance testing. You mean you're going to push me down the stairs? Jiang translated brightly, far too cheerful. We are conducting controlled gravitational impact tests. Zix sputtered. Got it. Pushing me down the stairs? Cool. Let's hurry. I can smell fresh coffee in the break room before anyone could stop her. Jiang launched herself cheerfully down the 20-step platform, bouncing and tumbling in a horrifying spectacle. The council watched in stunned silence as Jiang sat up, brushed herself off and declared, "Okay, that was fun. But you might want to pad the bottom step, pretty sure I dented it with my face." Dr. Zix's scales shifted to an even deeper shade of green. "You've sustained multiple cranial impacts. We need to." "Yeah, probably a concussion." Jiang waved him off, casually checking her nose for bleeding. "Nothing a little caffeine can't fix." "A nap won't fix this, though. Fair warning, last time I had a concussion, I spent 3 hours convincing my roommate that dolphins were just underwater horses. You might want to double-check anything I say for the next few hours." The medical teams huddled together, hastily revising their emergency care protocols to include provisions for coffee. "Test Protocol 2, a temperature resistance," Dr. Zix announced several hours later, his voice notably strained. "We will measure human adaptability to extreme temperature variations in a controlled..." Splash. "Dr. Jiang, you were supposed to wait for the monitoring equipment." Jiang's head emerged from the ice-covered test lake, her grin visible even through her chattering teeth. "Sorry, Doc. I figured the best data is spontaneous data, right? That water is literally at freezing temperature." "Yep. Reminds me of that spring break trip to Lake Michigan. Though at least this time I'm not trying to win a bet involving a rubber duck and 3 bottles of hot sauce." She paddled around cheerfully. "Hey, is the Saya ready yet? You can't possibly be thinking of using the heat tolerance chamber right after." "Race you there." Jiang hauled herself out of the lake, leaving a trail of freezing water as she sprinted toward the testing facility's Say unit. The council's chief medical officer began stress pulsing so rapidly they had to be transferred to a specialized containment field. "Test Protocol 3, a chemical processing and toxin resistance," Dr. Zix read from his notes, resignation thick in his tone. "We will begin with Dr. Jiang. What are you drinking?" Jiang glanced at the container in her hand. "Oh, this? Found it under the sink in the break room. Figured it was some kind of alien sports drink. Bit strong on the ammonia taste, but not bad once you get used to it. Kind of reminds me of my cousin's experimental moonshine made in a radiator." The entire room froze. Dr. Jiang Zix said carefully, "That is industrial-strength cleaning fluid." Jiang took another sip. "That explains the tingling sensation and why my tongue's slightly blue. Actually, is it supposed to be blue? Because it wasn't this color this morning." 3 alarm systems blared at once. The medical teams, now seasoned experts in human-specific crises, sighed collectively and began updating their toxicology protocols. "Does this mean we're skipping the toxin resistance test?" Jiang asked, hopeful. "Because after that cleaning fluid, I don't think anything could taste worse. Well, except maybe my ex's cooking. Now that was toxic." Supreme Counselor Inith, observing the proceedings, turned to Dr. Zix. "Doctor, I believe we need to update our classification of human durability." "Already done," Zix replied faintly, watching Jiang attempt to convince the medical team that the best treatment for chemical ingestion was hair of the dog. "I've added 16 new categories and 3 previously theoretical survival mechanisms. Though I'm beginning to suspect we're less conducting tests and more documenting ways humans shouldn't survive but somehow do." "I'd argue with that," Jiang called out, "but I just discovered I can taste colors. Did you know security protocols taste purple? That's weird, right? Also, is anyone else's skin vibrating? Or is that just me?" The medical teams collectively decided it was time to implement protocol, "Oh no, not again," which primarily involved keeping strong coffee and even stronger antidotes permanently on standby. "Should we proceed with the remaining tests?" a junior researcher asked nervously. Dr. Zix glanced at his notes, then at Jiang, who was now glowing faintly while explaining to the medical team that she felt perfectly fine. Finally, he looked back at his notes. "I believe," he said with forced composure, that in the interest of scientific integrity and my sanity we should take a brief recess, preferably one involving several stiff drinks. Ooh, drinks, Jiang perked up. Just keep me away from anything labeled technically not lethal. Learned that the hard way on shore leave. Though I did discover I can breathe fire under the right circumstances. The research team unanimously decided that some data was better left uncollected. The first sign of trouble came when the station's alarm shifted from its usual Dr. Jiang did something inadvisable tone to an actual emergency alert. Dr. Zix's scales immediately turned alarm purple. Security reports hostile boarding in progress, the AI announced calmly. Space pirates have breached decks 3 through 7. Please proceed to designated safety zones while avoiding a horrible death. Who programmed this AI? Jiang wondered aloud as council members and staff rushed to evacuate. I like their style. Dr. Zhang Zix grabbed her with 3 of his arms while using the others to secure critical research. We must get you to safety immediately. You have no natural armor, and these pirates are notoriously brutal. Yeah, about that. Jiang was already heading toward the xenobiology lab. The school tour group's still in there. You know, where we keep all the actually dangerous stuff. But you'll be killed. You're too fragile. Jiang's grin could have been classified as a weapon of mass destruction. Doc, after all these tests, you still don't get it, do you? Humans aren't fragile, we're just incredibly stubborn about staying down with that. She bolted toward the commotion and destruction. She's going to get herself killed, one of the junior researchers whispered fearfully. Actually, Zix murmured faintly, I'm starting to worry about the pirates. The scene in the xenobiology lab was pure chaos. 3 pirates, armed with plasma weapons and clad in the latest illegal combat armor, had cornered a group of alien children and their teachers. They had assumed the lab's security systems would be their only obstacle until a human came crashing through the ceiling vent, landing on their leader with what could only be described as malicious enthusiasm. You know, Jiang remarked casually, using the unconscious pirate as cover, I've always wanted to try a superhero entrance, though I think I broke something. Did anyone else hear a crack? Because I definitely did. The remaining pirates gawked as Jiang stood, her left arm hanging at an awkward angle. Oh yeah, that's broken, she nodded. Anyway, who's next? The pirates opened fire, and Jiang dove behind a lab bench, dragging 2 children with her. Okay kids, pop quiz, what's the first rule of lab safety? Don't drink anything Dr. Jiang hasn't tested first, one child offered hesitantly. Oddly specific, but valid, Jiang conceded. No, it's nowhere the emergency chemical showers are like that one right above our pirate friends. The children's eyes widened in realization. 3 seconds later, after someone pulled the emergency shower lever, the pirates were drenched in icy decontamination foam. Using their confusion to her advantage, Jiang tackled the nearest pirate, delivering what she later referred to as percussive diplomacy with her good arm. Hold still, the last pirate shouted, struggling to aim a shot. Why won't you just die like a normal, fragile species? First of all, rude, Jiang retorted, ducking a plasma bolt that scorched the wall. Second, hang on. Does anyone else smell something burning? Everyone paused, sniffing the air. Right, Jiang muttered. Plasma weapons plus volatile lab chemicals equals grabbing a fire extinguisher with her uninjured arm, she shouted. Everyone out. Field trip time. She guided the children toward the exit just as the first explosion rocked the lab. A plasma shot grazed her shoulder, spinning her around but failing to slow her down. Well, that's going to leave a mark, she muttered, raising her voice again. Single file, please. Just like evacuation drills, only with more explosions. Consider this an exciting, hands-on lesson in exothermic reactions. Another blast hit her leg as the last child exited, but Jiang caught herself and turned to face the final pirate with mild irritation. Really, she asked, patting out a small fire on her lab coat. I'm trying to teach here. This is a place of learning. She punctuated her point by hurling the fire extinguisher with unerring precision. When the security teams arrived 10 minutes later, the lab was partially ablaze, flooded with foam, and somehow producing its own localized weather system. The pirates lay unconscious, zip-tied, with "messed with the wrong scientists" scrawled on their foreheads in permanent marker. Jang sat in the middle of the destruction, applying a pressure bandage to her shoulder with her good arm, cheerfully explaining to the children why they should never attempt her actions. "And that's why we always keep extra zip ties in the lab," she was saying. "Also, remember, violence isn't a first solution. It's like third or fourth, right after coffee." Dr. Zix burst in, his scales flashing through a dizzying array of colors. "You're injured. You've been shot. You're on fire." "Only a little bit," Jang corrected, noticing her smoldering lab coat. "And I've had worse. Did I ever tell you about the time I tried to deep fry a turkey? Now that was a disaster. This? Just Tuesday. You have plasma burns, a broken arm, and enough adrenaline in your system to kill a small moon," Zix exclaimed. "Yeah, probably going to feel that tomorrow," Jang replied brightly. "But hey, great data on human emergency responses, right? That's got to count for something." A child raised an appendage. "Dr. Jang, is this going to be on the test?" "Absolutely not," Jang said. "But if anyone asks, we'll call it a practical demonstration of human biochemistry and emergency protocols." She tried to stand, wobbled, and sat back down. "Though maybe we finish this lesson after I visit medical. I'm tasting colors again, and I'm pretty sure it's not from the cleaning fluid this time." "The medical team is already en route," Zix assured her, adding nervously, "along with a trauma unit, a psychiatric evaluator, and possibly an exorcist." "Audiobook, you guys care?" Jang grinned, then looked thoughtful. "Hey, does this count as extra credit for my durability tests? I feel like surviving multiple plasma shots should earn bonus points." Zix stared in disbelief. "How are you even conscious?" "Spite, mostly," Jang replied. "And I haven't had my afternoon coffee yet." As the medical team arrived, she perked up. "Speaking of which, any chance we can swing by the break room on the way? Pretty sure I've earned a coffee break." "You're literally bleeding," Zix protested. "Yeah, but like not fatally." "Probably." She paused. "Hard to tell with plasma burns. Everything just feels tingly." As the medics finally loaded her onto a stretcher, after 3 failed attempts to keep her still, Jang called to the stunned security team, "Oh, and someone should check that weather system in the lab. Pretty sure mixing plasma fire with decontamination foam isn't in the safety protocols." The last thing Zix heard as she was whisked away was her cheerful voice asking, "So hypothetically, if someone used classified research equipment as improvised weapons, would that be misuse of resources or creative problem-solving?" The security team looked at the devastation, the unconscious pirates, then each other. "I vote we file this whole incident under reasons not to underestimate unarmored species," one researcher suggested. "Agreed," added another. "Though we should probably add a subcategory, especially if they're human and haven't had coffee." Dr. Zix simply sighed, already updating his notes. He had a sinking feeling the council would need an entirely new classification system by the end of this. "Esteemed members of the council," Dr. Zix began, his scales flickering between what he hoped was a professional blue-gray and the alarming trauma purple they kept threatening to shift to whenever he reviewed his findings. "I present my updated research on human durability, or as I now call it, why everything we thought we knew about survival mechanisms is wrong." He pulled up a hologram but studiously avoided looking at Dr. Jang, who sat in the back with her arm in a cast already decorated with what she referred to as doodles and the medical staff labeled as anatomically impossible xenobiology sketches. "First, let us address what we once viewed as evolutionary disadvantages. Humans lack natural armor not because they failed to evolve it, but because they never needed it. To put it in scientific terms, they are biological tanks wearing meat suits. "Aw, thanks," Doc Jiang called out. "That's the nicest thing anyone said about my meat suit since the ER staff called me suspiciously durable." Zix's scales flickered briefly to distress orange, but he pressed on. "The average human possesses what can only be described as a suite of biological superpowers that render traditional protective evolution redundant. These include, but are horrifyingly not limited to," he continued, displaying a holographic list, "extreme endurance." He gestured to the display. "Humans can continue functioning long after sustaining injuries that would incapacitate most species, as demonstrated by Dr. Jiang's insistence on finishing a tour despite multiple plasma burns and a compound fracture." "The kids had questions," Jiang protested. "You can't leave an educational opportunity hanging." "Enhanced regeneration," Zix continued. "Humans heal at rates bordering on the miraculous, able to regrow tissue, mend bones, and restore limited organ function." "Oh yeah, livers are wild," Jiang interjected. "My uncle lost like 70% of his in a thing involving a lawnmower and a flamingo, but it grew back. Doctor said they'd never seen anyone so cheerful about traumatic yard maintenance." Zix's scales shifted to a resigned toppy. "Unprecedented pain tolerance. Humans can and will continue functioning through levels of pain that would incapacitate most species." "To be fair," Jiang added, "that's mostly spite and coffee." She raised her non-casted arm, revealing an empty cup. "Speaking of which, I'm out." "That's your 8th cup today," Zix pointed out. "Yeah, but I lost at least 3 cups worth of blood yesterday, so I'm just maintaining balance." "It's science." Several council members scribbled frantic notes about human caffeine dependency while others simply stared, horrified. "Moving on," Zix said hastily. "We've also documented extraordinary temperature adaptation, toxin resistance bordering on absurdity, and what can only be described as selective immortality through sheer stubbornness." He paused. "This brings us to the most troubling discovery. Humans are largely unaware of their own durability. They routinely survive incidents that should be fatal and dismiss these events as just another Tuesday." "Are you still on about the ceiling vent thing?" Jiang asked. "That was a totally valid tactical decision. Plus, I'd wanted to try that entrance since I saw it in a movie as a kid." "You fell 3 decks. "Exactly. Much faster than taking the stairs." The Supreme Counselor's crystals pulsed with concern. "Dr. Zix, are you implying that humans regularly survive potentially fatal situations for—" "Oh, wait till you hear about my childhood," Jiang said brightly. "This one time my brother and I tested if umbrellas worked as parachutes." "Dr. Jiang," Zix interrupted, his tone pained. "Perhaps we could save the recreational near-death experiences for the appendix." "Fine. But you're missing out on the story with 2 trash can lids, a shopping cart, and what we thought was a rocket engine." Several council members began stress-molting. "In conclusion," Zix announced loudly, "I recommend reclassifying humans as Class X resilient organisms with the subclassification of reality-adjacent survival capabilities. Additionally, I propose all first contact protocols include the warning: do not assume injury, blood loss, broken bones, or apparent death will stop them, especially if they haven't had coffee." Also, one researcher added nervously, "Maybe add a note about not touching their coffee. Trust me." Further recommendations, Zix continued, include never assuming a human is out of the fight simply because they appear dead, injured, or on fire. Sometimes they're all 3 and still completing mission objectives while making puns. "That's just multitasking," Jiang chimed in. "And my puns are excellent, thank you." Finally, Zix concluded, his scales settling on a color that could only be described as seen too much. "I propose creating a new research division solely to investigate why humans are like this, staffed entirely by therapists." "Seconded," said every researcher present. "Motion carried," the Supreme Counselor declared, her crystals still pale. "Though perhaps we should wait for Dr. Jiang's arm to heal." "Oh," this Jiang waved her cast. "Doc cleared me this morning. My spite-based healing factor is off the charts. Anyone want to help me try that ceiling vent entrance with one arm? The chamber erupted in unanimous protest. Your species, Zix said with feeling, is terrifying. Aw, thanks, Jang beamed. Want to hear about the time I tried parkour in a hospital while concussed? The sound of stress molting filled the room as the council adjourned.